And that specific example has a higher interest rate. You can see it's a 5.66% interest rate.
Yeah.
If this were 3%, maybe, right? But what I would do in this situation with this agent is this would be relationship building for me. What I would do is I'd call that agent. I'd say, look, I know that you guys are brand new on market. You're probably not even considering something like this at this point, but this is what I do. Have you ever done a transaction like that before? Most likely they're going to say what, Laura?
They're going to say no, or they're not interested, or try to get you off the phone.
Yeah, exactly. All of the above probably, right? In different ways.
Right.
But what I would do in that situation is really explain to them the value that this type of acquisition strategy can the value that it can add to their business, in the sense that it may not work on this property, but the chances that they come across something similar in the future, probably, right? Probably at some point. And so, Joe, the advantage with these leads, because what happens is we're getting these leads on day one, as opposed to the way that most people are pulling data, they're getting it on day 10 to 20 because of the way that the data aggregators from PropStream and Batch pull them. They're not getting them on day one.
So I hate to interrupt, Mike. These leads here are literally brand new to market within a day or two of hitting market.
Yep. These I think, are 2 to 4 days old, but they're still way before PropStream gets them in their system.
What about Deal Source?
Yeah, I had a call with Justin Tumanowski a couple days ago. They haven't quite figured this out yet. So yeah, Deal Sauce is the same as PropStream at this point. So this would just be.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
You're calling agents. So I've been niching down to like greater than 80 days on market. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm like, your property's not selling, but is it my understanding that you're calling agents like right away, just to kind of get it out there as an option?
Yeah. So this is just my strategy. Everyone's strategy is different, but.
No, I like it.
Well, hear me out on this, because I think that there's some advantage to it. For me, what I do is I go in there and I explain to them how I purchase, why I purchase this way. And then what I also do is I plant the seed. So let's say, for example, I'm calling on day 1 or 2, you're calling on day 80. I've basically had 80 days to build that relationship with that agent. Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing the whole time too, Laura, is I'm saying, look, the conversation that I have with an agent on day 1, 2, 3, 4, up to really day 10 is very different than the conversation that you're probably having at day 80. When you call the agent for the first time, how many times have you heard from the agent, are you calling about sub 2 or something creative? Or if you're calling about this, I'm hanging up the phone. Something to that effect. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These conversations are very different. Unless they've had a situation in the past with a low equity listing, the conversations are much more open. And because agents are generally unfamiliar with this type of acquisition strategy, it is a much different conversation in general. So it's much more educational. So what I do is I will tell them, look, if I were in the seller's shoes, since you guys are brand new on market, I probably wouldn't even consider something like this at this point. However,
I would imagine that brings their defenses way down.
100%, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not even really a threat at this point. What I intend to come off as is someone who can possibly provide value to them, possibly. And so what I will do is I'll say, look, if I'll use you, Laura, as a specific example here. You can be Mrs. Agent here. When I call you and I say, Laura, have you ever done a transaction like this before?
I haven't.
Yeah, a lot of agents haven't that we do deals with. It's just not taught in the real estate education. It's not taught in the CEUs. It's generally unfamiliar. We're seeing a lot more of these types of transactions in today's market. And if you guys so choose to pursue something like this, either on this listing, or if it makes sense for you to pursue something like this on another listing in the future, let me explain to you how you can properly protect your seller. And then I'll go down the list. Basically what I'm doing is I am scorching the earth against everyone who's going to call on day 10 or 12 or 14 or 20. So I'm saying things like, hey, just a heads up, Laura, I know that this is kind of a new type of listing for you. So in about 10 days, you're going to start to get a lot of phone calls. You're going to start to get a lot of LOIs that look exactly the same with exactly the same numbers from different companies. What I'm going to tell you today, hopefully you can use on a listing in the future. If you have to use it here, even if you don't use me to buy the property from you, I want to make sure to properly explain how you can protect your seller. So I want to make sure that the buyer provides the seller with a promissory note and a deed of trust. I want to make sure that the buyer has reserves in escrow so that if they are to miss a payment, it does not affect the seller's credit. I want to make sure that they get a new insurance policy that lists the seller as an additionally insured. And I also want to make sure that the property is either put into a trust to reduce the chances of a bank actually foreclosing on this property if a due on sale clause is called. And I also want servicing to be set up. One thing, Laura, Mrs. Laura agent here, one thing I would also encourage you to do is ask for a hard earnest money deposit, because there are a lot of people in our little world who are just getting properties under contract and not performing. I can imagine for you as the expert who's there to protect the seller's best interest, you don't want a situation where you waste valuable time by people dropping out of a contract, right? So those sorts of things, for me personally, I think if I do those before everyone else has a conversation with the agent in this case, I feel like I'm a little bit ahead, and maybe a lot ahead. Maybe.
Sounds like it. What did you say? Ask for a hard earnest money contract? What was the last word?
Ask for a hard earnest money deposit.
Deposit. Okay. Yeah.
And basically all that means is I want a day or two personally before I sign a contract to inspect the property. But when I submit my deposit, I want to make sure it goes hard and not something like $100, right? I want something substantial, 1%, $5,000, whatever that is.
Okay.
Mike, can I ask, Mike, you're calling these agents as the potential buyer, or what's the strategy? Is you try to buy it sub to wholesale it? You try to buy it sub to?
Yeah. So I personally am calling deals here in Texas. I live in Austin. I'm calling as a buyer because that's what I am. What I do is I buy subject to deals. I'll most likely resell them on owner finance. I might keep them as a long-term rental, but the ones that I'm specifically calling on, legitimately, I am the buyer. That's what I am doing personally. If you guys are ever wholesaling, you don't have to have this conversation at the very beginning. But what I would do is definitely have that conversation at least a couple weeks before closing with the agent saying, look, ultimately I am not the buyer here, but I do have a partner who's going to buy it. And one thing I would highly encourage you guys to do is if you're focusing on any given market, a specific market or region or whatever, is know who your buyer is so that you can have these conversations before. So let's say, Joe, you want to buy a rental in New York, and I'm calling on New York. What I want to do is know exactly what you're looking for. If this property fits that criteria, I'm actually going to call you before the property closes or before I get under contract and say, hey, Joe, just out of curiosity, I'm working on this deal here. It looks like it's going to be about this entry fee. This is the rental rate. Does that make sense for you? Would you buy that if I were able to get it under contract at this price, or what would you pay? And so that way you're not stringing anyone along, and you're also being completely upfront with the seller and the agent, and you're giving them an opportunity to say no. I want the seller to meet my buyer, and I want my agent to meet my buyer, and for them to also do their own due diligence on my buyer to make sure that that person is someone that they want to have this long-term relationship with. This is a really good discussion, guys. Let's just leave this in here. Let's start to roll here. I'll do a quick introduction. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This is the Dial In Podcast, Low Equity Edition. Today we are joined by Paul Alvarez, Laura Groom, Joe Delli Carpini. Did I say that right, Joe?
That's very good. Very
cool.
Well. You said it well.
Thank you. My wife's Italian, so you know what. I don't even know if you are, by the way, but just a guess.
I am. It's a good deal. Little Irish mixed in there.
Got it. Yeah, me too. Me too. So as always, we are sponsored by RocketBotLeads.ai. We've been talking about the advantages of this lead source for the past 10, 15 minutes or so. The advantage, of course, is that we get the data very quickly as opposed to waiting for the data aggregators to get it on day 10 or 20 or whatever it is. It gives us an opportunity, as Laura asked a great question, to position ourselves in a way that builds trust and hopefully builds a relationship in the long term. So today we're joined by three amazing callers. Let me go around really quickly. Paul, you have already done an introduction before, so you know the routine. Tell us about yourself, where you are, what you do, and how people can contact you to work with you.
So I'm fairly new to Sub 2. Right now I am just working on, right now I guess direct to agents. Actually, my main goal is just to be being a better communicator, talking to sellers, direct to agents, direct to seller. I live in Kyle, Texas. And I don't know what else. I'm not sure.
Paul, you're brand new to Sub 2. We met first at a meetup in New Braunfels in person, and you brought your son. And so what do you want this all to look like in 6 months? Where do you want this all to go?
So my short-term goals for 6 months is to just overall just be a better communicator and hopefully get to the point to where right now I get really nervous on talking on the phone. So I just want it to feel natural. As you know, as you get up, you get out of bed, you walk, you brush teeth, all that's like natural to us. And I want to get to that point to where I'm just able to pick up the phone and the phone doesn't feel like a ton of bricks.
Two things. Did you guys watch The Office? Have you guys watched The Office?
No.
Okay, so I'm speaking to a crowd that isn't going to get it, but maybe you guys will. So there are these two characters, Dwight, okay, and God, why can't I think of his name? He's like the character in the show. Anyway, the other guy.
You can make up anything. We haven't seen it.
Jim. His name is Jim.
Okay.
It's actually Jim. I just remembered it. So Jim pranks Dwight all the time. All the time. For example, he'll wrap his desk in wrapping paper for Christmas, things like this. He'll do those sorts of things. Put his stapler in Jell-O. And one time what he did is he was able to add a penny every single day inside of his telephone. What they do is they cold call people for sales. They're in the sales business. So for about a year, he was dropping a penny into this phone. So it got heavier and heavier and heavier, but he built up that muscle, right? Of, hey, I can't feel it. I can't feel it. But long story short, the last day he removed all of the pennies, and the scene is that he grabs the phone and whacks himself in the face. It's just like it's a very quick thing. I find that funny when you say that sometimes the phone feels like a ton of bricks. I get that too. And the hardest thing for me personally, every single day, this has not gone away for 20 years, is making that first phone call. I have to get into a rhythm. And personally, it takes me probably 2 or 3 phone calls to get into my rhythm. But the fear of picking up that phone for me personally never goes away. What happens, though, at the end is the reward at the end of the phone call or the end of the day or whenever you do a deal is so worth the anxiety and the fear along the way. So just keep pushing yourself, Paul, okay?
Yeah, and ironically, just to comment on what you just said, like from people that I've talked to, like that's just what it is. Like the fear never goes away. You just get used to it.
Yep. You just get better at it, and as a result, the fear goes away. Laura, where are you from?
I am from St. Louis. I'm about 30 miles west in Lake St. Louis.
Very cool. That's awesome. Yeah. What do you do there?
I have been with a hospital for 32 years, and ICU nurse. So,
Incredible.
But I am wanting to transition out of that season, 32 years season of being in medicine. Real estate's always been a passion of mine. I love like fix and flip, actually. I love transformation, but I joined Sub 2 in May, and then it ended up being an eventful summer with the decline of my mother's health, and I ended up losing her in the fall. And now I'm just kind of jumping back in and learning everything I can and exploring, trying not to have shiny object syndrome, but, someone put it like, well, sometimes you have to stop and smell all the flowers to see which one's your favorite. And so I'm learning to lean into Sub 2. So at first I only wanted to do kind of like wholesale or fix and flip, which by the way, I haven't done either. I haven't got my first deal, but, and I kind of pushed Sub 2 away just because I didn't understand it. And now I'm like, well, that's silly. Like, learn about it so you can understand it and grow. And so that's where I am now, learning about it. And and the more you learn, the more it makes sense. And you're like, yeah, you can see how this helps people. And so that's what I'm doing.
Sorry to hear about your mother. That's
Thank
always
you.
hard.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I can imagine that being an ICU nurse, you see things that impact you, right? All day long for a long time. So my wife was a clinical psychologist at the VA working with highly suicidal veterans. Mm-hmm. It's hard not to take the things that you have at the office or the hospital home with you.
Right.
So that's got to be challenging.
Yeah. Well, yes, I lost my son 2 years ago. And so ICU is always, it is a challenging position, but when you're called to do it, like the grace was there to do it. But now this stage of life on the side of two major losses, and as long as I've done it as well, like I'm just ready to be all in with this and give my resignation letter.
I hope we can help you get there. I think you're a hero. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you so much.
Joe, my Irish Italian, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I am from Westchester, New York. I've been a licensed realtor here in New York for the last 8 years, and I've been practicing or in the business for 7 out of the 8 years. Dual career the whole time. I'm just retiring from my civil service job in New York City, and mainly focused on referrals because dual career is kind of hard to jump into the lead generation and the whole full setup with real estate. So for the past 6 months to a year, I've been trying to generate my own leads on the retail side. I just joined Sub 2 at the end of November, so I've only been in the program for about 6 weeks. Trying to sharpen up my skills as a person who can call any lead, whether it be a lead agent or seller. Trying to learn all the different methods of purchasing and the exit strategies, and trying to unlearn all of the negative or untrue things that I've been told about creative financing and Sub 2 and wholesaling and whatnot. You're right when you say it's not taught in the brokerages. It is not taught at all. And I'm looking to grow my network of people and potential partners and the community itself to continue to invest and also maybe even continue my retail side. I'm not sure if I want to continue that when it's time to renew the license, but it is definitely a challenge, and I'm looking to like Laura's trying to do, not have to go back to a W-2. I'd like for my real estate endeavors to take over and be a lifestyle instead of just a job.
I love that. Thank you for that. By the way, we talk a lot about this on these call-in sessions. You have a major advantage because you are an agent. We're going all direct to agent. If I was an agent, what I would do is I would say, hey, my name is Mike. I'm an agent out here in New York. Even it doesn't matter which market you're calling in. But I think anytime you can kind of find a commonality with the person that you're calling, especially an agent who feels like you guys are on the same level, your conversation is going to go a lot more differently than it would be if I were to call and say, hey, I'm an investor looking to invest. I think that's sort of a competing type of relationship as opposed to let's do the same kind of business. Let's sit on the same side of the table. So
I usually try to enter my phone call saying, "Hey, I'm in your shoes. I know what you're going through.
mm-hmm.
Let's try to collaborate and get your client sold for in the best possible way, so that everybody wins." And usually, when I go into a role play strategy, I always try to volunteer as the agent and try to hit all the different types of personalities that an agent can give you. To learn from me how to speak to other agents and teach them and guide them through talking to their sellers, talking to their clients for different options other than the traditional methods that we always use.
Yeah, I love that. All right, guys. Paul, you are the only returning caller. So Joe and Laura, let me explain to you really quickly how this works. What we're going to do is give you guys a position on that lead list that you've received to start calling on. Joe, why don't you start at the top? Laura, why don't you start at the bottom? Paul, you start around the middle section. And what we do here is we make our phone calls on our cell phone. We are muting this webinar platform so that we don't hear the dial. But whenever you guys are on a phone call with somebody, as long as someone else isn't on a phone call, unmute here so we can listen. The beauty of more people being involved today, especially having 3 people here as opposed to 2 or 1, is you're going to get more feedback, right? And the whole idea here, to Paul's point earlier, is let's all get better on the phone together, right? We all have something to learn. So I want your guys' opinion on every single phone call. So why don't you guys start calling? I will kind of take the floor for a few minutes until you guys get on a phone call. And then when you get on a phone call, unmute and let's hear the phone call. Sound good?
And I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead, please.
Oh, I'm going to go and make sure I have that list. And then Joe's starting at the top of the list. I'm starting at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Make sure I didn't have that reversed.
Yep. Okay. Paul's in the middle.
Oops.
And we're looking to see if the agent is willing to speak with their sellers about a creative way to get sold. Like, in other words, what's the direct question that I want to get answered besides your 4 pillars, your condition, your timeline, your price, your motivation, and all that stuff.
Yep. So great question. So let's talk about an objective for the phone call, right? Mm-hmm. What's the hopeful end result? What we want to do here is see if the seller and agent, right? Seller/agent is open to receiving this type of an offer or even hearing about it, right? The assumption again is that since they're brand new on market, they're probably not considering something like this. So I kind of like to talk around it a lot, but what I want to really see is, would this type of sale make sense in the eyes of the agent for the seller? So Joe, I would say something like, hey, have you guys considered something like this? This is one of the ways we purchase. Have you guys considered just selling the property, leaving the mortgage in place, and maximizing the seller's equity? They're going to say something like, well, what do you mean? Right? That's like your wide open door to step in through. Hey, this is exactly what I do, and I do it all day long. Let me explain to you how it works. So that's the end result is just, yes, I'm interested, right? A little interested.
Now, once if let's say I'm going to be confident and say 1 out of the next 5 that I call says yes, explain to me what you mean.
I see.
For you to come on and say, you know what? Let me bring my partner Mike here. He's a little bit more versed in explaining this.
Great question. So if at any point during the phone calls, any of you, get to the point where you kind of feel like you've hit a wall, right? You don't know where exactly to take the conversation. Maybe you're 2 weeks into sub 2 and you don't know everything quite yet. Stop and say, okay, cool. I understand that's a great question, Mr. and Mrs. Agent. Let me have my partner give you a call to explain that to you. He or she has done more of these transactions than I have. And what we'll do at the end is I can make that phone call to the agent. That sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay. So I'm in my emails and I've gotten a lot of things from you, but no list. So you have the correct email. I've gotten the low equity calling session in 3 hours, the meeting in 1 hour, acquisition paperwork, but that's not the leads. That was saying what's expected of us. So I still don't have a list. I don't know why.
No problem. Let me get this to you.
Do you want
Laura,
a different email?
Laura, at the very bottom of the 3 hour, the one I got, the low equity calling session in 3 hours, it's at the very, very, very bottom, right above the reply button, and it has a little CSV.
Oh yeah, there it is. I'm sorry. I need to I was looking for like an attachment, but it is attachment. Okay, so I'm gonna open this up. Okay, so I have it. Thank you.
No problem. Laura, you're at the bottom. Joe at the top. Paul in the middle. Mute the webinar platform when you get on. Unmute. And I can't wait to hear the phone calls that you guys get on. So treat this as if it's just a casual conversation. Think of rapport building before anything else.
Can I say one more thing?
Laura, last thing. Just kidding. You can ask as many questions as you want.
Well, Paul was saying about like things you were trying to overcome with talking and stuff, and I have some of that as well. My thing is being savvy on the computer, navigating quicker, going from here to there. Oh gosh, got to get this back up. Where's my mute button? So thank you for your patience.
Of course. Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem at all. So get calling, and let's see if we can get on the phone with anybody. Joe, while you guys are all calling, I'm going to talk about the 4 pillars thing that you mentioned, because I think that this is actually really important. You can listen in or do whatever. I think that 4 pillars is really, really important when it comes to direct to seller. Very, very important. The idea with the 4 pillars is we want to figure out what their situation is, what the condition of the house is, what their asking price is, motivation, these sorts of things. What we want to do is really take that information and use it in our conversations, not necessarily against them, but we're trying to figure out we're trying to find the bunnies, as Pace always says, right? So we're trying to figure out how we can help somebody. And to do that with the direct to seller situation, finding those 4 pillars is really helpful. Direct to agent, I feel like, is a little bit different, because direct to agent, we know 3 out of the 4. I talk about this a lot. I'm sorry if you guys have heard this before. Excuse me, but 3 out of the 4 we know, right? We know price. It's listed on market at a certain price. We know condition for the most part. We can see it on Zillow or Redfin or whatever. We also know timeline for the most part. Again, not specifically, but most people who have their properties listed on market don't want to sell in a year or 2 years or 6 months. They want to sell ASAP. So the only one that we don't know is the motivation. Now, anytime that we work with an agent, finding motivation for a seller is really hard, because it's not like we can go to the agent and say, what is the seller's motivation, right? It's much more of a business-minded conversation. So if we're looking for motivation, you can still ask things. I would argue, though, that it's not as helpful. I mean, sometimes it can be, but most of the time, I would say 50-50. It's helpful, 50% it's not helpful. But you can ask questions like, hey, this looks like a beautiful property. Is there something wrong with it? The response from the agent's always going to be, no, there's nothing wrong with it. The sellers just want to whatever the next is, right? And that's when we find out motivation. You can ask questions like that to get to the motivation. Now, if you are able to find the motivation from an agent, how do we use that to our advantage? Or how do we use that information to provide them with extra value? Let's say, for example, a lot of the deals that we're calling on are low equity VA loans. And the reason for that is because with a VA loan, you don't have to put any money down. You can buy anywhere, don't put any money down as long as you have entitlement to purchase. And we also see a lot of movement with military personnel, right? So let's say, for example.
Hey, Teresa, my name is Paul Alvarez. How are you today?
I'm pretty good, Paul. How can I help you, sir?
Me and my partner were looking through some listings today. We're looking for our next rental or possibly Airbnb. And we came across your listing for the property on Silver Beach Avenue.
Okay, yeah.
I noticed that it's fairly new on market. But I have to ask, I can see the overall condition on the online, but Are there any deficiencies that you may be aware of that are listed in the seller's disclosures?
Not really listed in seller's disclosure. He needs to fill the spuds out, but I would say like the solar's good, and he's got a water conditioner system that's rented, and that's fine. It's got a reverse osmosis as well, which is great for your guest. And it's rented. It's like 70 something a month on that. So
okay.
Just so you, I think he's going to pay off the solar at closing. I will verify that for you. That way it'd be free and clear. The other thing is, he recently renovated and finished out the closed-in porch area, which is where the laundry room is.
Mm-hmm.
Does have an electrician coming either today or tomorrow to kind of clean up some wires there and put kind of redo a couple of things that I told him we can't have an open junction box and stuff like that. So there's a few things he's going to be addressing even before we have inspections. And so that room looks nice now. But the flooring in the kitchen, that would probably need to be replaced if you want to do a nice Airbnb or rental. There's some cracks in that tile flooring, and he's an airman on very limited income. As you know, they don't get paid a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So really doesn't have the money to do that. But he's asking $315, and he's willing to, listen to all offers, and especially if you say, hey, could you do a flooring allowance? He may be open to that. He just doesn't have the money to do it himself right now.
Okay.
That's really the only thing I know of that could be, detrimental to you, getting it right away and getting people in.
Okay. So it sounds like he's put quite a bit of money into it, just trying to get it ready to sell.
Yeah.
So I know, me and my partner, we acquire property, different ways. With that being said, the amount of money that he has put into the property, I would make a cash offer, but to be honest with you, I don't think a cash offer would work, because if I came in, I'm probably looking somewhere in between a 260, 270 mark, which may not even be beneficial to your seller at all. Yeah.
That's lower than what he paid. He bought it 2 years ago, and that's lower than what he paid.
Okay. So the cash offer wouldn't work. Now, would y'all be interested in a creative offer? And at this point, I understand, it may not be, because it is new on market. It's not something that y'all would be open to. But do you feel like your seller would be open to a cash offer, or is it just too early a creative offer?
Well, define creative offer, because what his situation is, he's still active military. He's being transferred to California next month. He has to leave the end of this month.
Okay.
So he'll have been out. And so it'll be empty. We'll be holding open houses, and, when you have an empty house, it's so much easier to show. And so I'm very, hopeful that we'll get a good offer. Now, between you and me, because of the flooring situation, I think $315 is a little high, but if he's willing to give concessions for that, then, it should be fine, or even a price reduction to cover that. But really, that's about the only thing that is wrong with property. Has a really nice deep pool. A lot of people like that. He needs to, get, and also the $315 includes him wanting to pay off the solar. So that's quite a bit of money right there.
Okay,
So
but I'm sorry. For the solar, how much do you think that he owes on that solar?
I'm thinking it was around 20 grand. So now you're under 3 easy. And then and he paid with everything he had to pay. His loan was like 278, his VA loan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back around your previous question as far as like the creative offer. So me and my partner, we buy houses creatively because sometimes cash offers don't work for homeowners. So what we do is we reach out to agents, particularly with sellers who have or some who are going through like a foreclosure or have a low equity situation. And what we do is we purchase the home at the asking price. So in your case, like the asking price would be $315. We would go ahead and cover that cost of $315, and we would pay closing costs, pay your commission, and pay out the seller's equity over a period of time. So right now, like I'm just estimating off the numbers of what I see. Like it's not going to be accurate at all, but I'm estimating that your seller has roughly $50,000 worth of equity. It's not net equity because if you can figure at the current selling price, you subtract the 8% commission. That would be his actual net equity. But what we would do is do the current asking price of $315 times that by 0.8, and then subtract the actual net equity, which, and what I'm seeing is an estimated of $50,506, and then $25,306 will be paid out to your seller over a period of time. So we would give you your asking price in order for in exchange for terms. And what we would do is we would come in and take over the mortgage, so your seller wouldn't have to worry about that handling that responsibility. There are various factors to consider. I know, like whenever we approach agents and sellers, there's always questions about, okay, well, how long will the mortgage stay in my name? What would happen if we default? And those are things to really consider when talking to your seller. But we have systems and processes that take place, that we have set up to protect your sellers. And it's just really a matter of, okay, well, are y'all open to something different? And I get it, like it's not for everyone, but I do believe like it does have a place. Because I know it's not taught to real estate agents, and it's something different. So, there are some agents where we get a lot of pushback from it, who just don't want nothing to do with it because they're not familiar with it and it's different. But we do have other agents that we worked with in the past, and it's really been really great for them and their sellers who are in a difficult situation. So my partner does all the transaction. He goes into like real detail as far as the system and processes about like how exactly we protect your sellers. I have a general idea, but he handles that part of the business and the deals and the transactions. So if that's something you would be interested in, I can go ahead and schedule a call or have him reach out to you and go over like step by step, like what we would do to protect your seller, and ask any questions that you or your seller may have.
Well, number one, that the main thing is it's a VA loan. So I don't know if you can assume a VA loan. Yeah,
so like that would, my partner Mike would be able to answer that. I know in the past we have done these type of transactions, especially with VA loans. I'm not sure what your seller's plans are like after he moves on from this house. Was he trying to buy another house?
Yes. He needs to free up his entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and that's something I know that we are able to do.
Okay.
I don't know all the details exactly as far as like the steps and processes, but I do know like we have done these transactions we have done these types of transactions with VA loans in the past, where we have come in, we did assume the loan. I mean, not assume, take over the loan, and the seller was able to get into their second house. Like it is possible to do.
Okay. All right. So, like you said, you can't explain everything to me. Can you, between you and your partner, can you send me an email, like breaking down what your offer is and how it would be laid out? And I'd be happy to. I mean, you don't have to give an official offer. You just write me an email. What's your intentions? How it will play out, and I'll present that to him and try to go over it with him. And if you would like, and even talk with him, that's fine. We can have a 3-way conversation.
I think that will be great. That way we can all just get on the same page. Because like like right now, I'm explaining it to you, but like I said, I don't have all the details, but my partner does. So what if he tries to go over and he explains it over to you? Like you may come up with a question, be like, oh, maybe I forgot to ask this question. So when my partner gets on the phone, and if you're able to, after he sends you the email and you review it, if you want to go forward and just do like a 3-way call, and he can just sit there and explain the entire process between you and the seller, I think that would be more beneficial and, pretty simple to do. I mean, it just depends on what you let us know what you want to do after you receive the letter, and then we can just move forward from there.
Yeah, you can send me an LOI, a letter of intent, like what's your intentions, and break it down, and then give the phone numbers of who I need to talk to. Okay,
yeah, we'll do. And so what I'll do is I'll have my partner Mike reach out to you. I'll have him send an LOI, and then I'll just have him in that submit his contact number, and you can reach out to him. But I can also just have him reach out to you as well.
Okay. All right. That sounds fine. Yeah, because he does need to sell quickly, so this may be advantageous for him. I don't want to say no. I like to have an open mind and research everything. Okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. All right. Well, thank you for taking my call. And we'll be sending you that email here shortly.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Right,
have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Paul,
What's up?
amazing job.
Thank you.
Before we go around the room, tell me how you feel you did on that phone call.
My heart was racing the entire time.
Yep. Totally get it. What else did you feel on that phone call? I've been talking to Jeff Smith, and like he was saying, like you were saying earlier, you can't talk to agents and sellers the same. They're completely different. Sellers, you try to find the motivation. Agents, they want to get down to numbers. They want numbers. Like you can go, why are your sellers selling? What's the condition of the property? Well, all that's listed online. Like you can get into like what I mentioned, like any deficiencies, like because roof. I always go with the foundation route because that's typically not listed in there. So I'll like any deficiencies like foundation. Mm-hmm. And typically they'll say yay or nay. And I always go in, what I've learned is going at a low ball anchor, because then you can start the conversation there. Because right at that point, you just made an offer. And so they're just like, now they're thinking about that offer, and now the negotiations can begin. Then you can start asking questions like, oh, so I came in around like a 260, and I wasn't expecting her just to start saying what she was saying. I was just expecting her to say, oh, no, that's not going to work for me, or for my seller.
And then, but if she would have went that route, I would have been like, okay, well, tell me more about why this offer doesn't work, so I can fully understand like the situation. Like, and I put it on her to like tell me what's going on. And that's kind of the route I was going to go.
Yeah, she was a very open agent, very open, telling you exactly what she thought of the listing. She thought it was priced too high, right? What else did you guys pick up on, Joe and Laura, on that phone call?
Oh, I just thought that Paul was so fortunate to get her. I mean, she was so friendly. She didn't seem like she was in a rush. She wasn't just saying, oh, send me an offer, send me an offer. I mean, I was like, let's do it. You were fortunate, I thought.
So part of that is luck, right? Just the agent. Part of it is also timing based on the data that Paul's calling, right? Mm-hmm. She hasn't had 90 days yet or 80 days of people saying, let's do on it, Mm-hmm. So that changes it definitely a little bit. I can tell you that in 75 days, she's probably going to be like we're used to, Laura. Hey, if this is sub 2, I don't want to talk about it,
Right.
Joe, what did you think of Paul's call?
So it was a little strange, being this is the first time I've been on this type of call where I was trying to make my call and still hear what Paul was saying and what you were saying and trying to. So I finally just stopped the call. Actually, the second agent that I called stopped the call because she was in a meeting. So she said she's going to call me back. But what I did hear, besides the agent being open, and I think this is positive now that the first 3 or 4 days is crucial to get to them, to make that rapport, is that she asked the question for him to explain what he meant by either creative. So she opened the door for him to continue to pitch however which way we can get in the door with this purchase, with locking down this property. And that shows me that an agent like that is willing to learn different avenues rather than what was pounded into their heads from their brokerage. And she's actually down to earth too, saying before that she thought the listing price was a little too high. That makes me a little bit nervous because that tends to be like the seller is pulling the horse, or the cart is pulling the horse versus the horse pulling the cart. Mm-hmm. So when she has to go back and talk to her seller, she may have a hard time explaining it to her or to the seller, the type of offer that is being made. So teaching her as the agent is more critical than we think. So she knows how to explain it to her seller.
One thing she did really well, Joe, I think you picked up on this too, was at the end she said, I'm happy to bring my seller on so you can explain it to the seller.
Yeah, that's a great offer. That's a great offer by the agent is that to be part of the call to learn along with her seller so they can both ask questions.
And that's very rare for an agent to say that. So what I always like to do is control the conversation as much as I possibly can, meaning I want to be able to give information or provide information directly to the seller, either through the agent or directly to the seller. And what I mean by that is there are a couple different ways you can do it. You could do a 3-way call. You could provide resources and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Agent, you give this to your seller. What I also like to do is have a call, a Zoom, something that I can record after I've sent the offer. So in this case, she wants an LOI. So let's kind of play this out a second. If she wants an LOI, what I'll say to her is, I'm going to send you over an LOI. Let me give you a call to discuss with you exactly how this process works. I'll record it, whether it's audio or audio and video, and then you can simply send that to your seller, right? So it's actually the seller's hearing it from you and not from the agent. You're not playing the game of telephone. So think about ways, there are a bunch of unique ways that you can control the conversation. Paul, great job. One thing I'll tell you is, or one bit of advice that I can give you is, you don't have to sort of reveal everything on the first phone call. There are certain things that I probably wouldn't have said on that phone call. What I like to do on the first one, at least, is there interest? Let me explain to you how it works. Very, very high level, right? And then as questions come up, really dive deep into it. I think that there was a point there in the conversation where you kind of went down a rabbit hole yourself, and then you found yourself unable to answer the question on the topic that you brought up yourself. And so you said, well, my partner knows more about this than I do. What I would do is just keep it really, really high level and say, look, I'm going to send you over an LOI. If you guys have questions that I can't answer, I'm happy to put you in touch with my partner. If I can answer them directly, then I can be your contact person, something along those lines. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great job.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead, please.
No, so like another thing is like you were saying, I went down a rabbit hole. Like I said too much. Like I probably shouldn't have thrown out the commission and everything, because when I was talking to Jeff's like, don't give out don't give out everything, like, because you may get one that's where you don't have to pay the seller's commission, where you may just have to pay just the closing costs.
That's right.
It's just like, I have all these shiny objects that I can offer, but I'm only going to give you this and just see if they take it. If they don't take it, well, then I can do this for you.
Yep, exactly right. You can say something to the effect of, as the buyer, I will pay all closing costs. The assumption from the agent is that includes commissions. If they ask, then you can address it. But you're right. There's no sense in offering something that you don't have to offer. Joe, you were going to say something.
Yeah. So in the last 30 days, since I've been making calls while being in sub 2, most of the time I'm being taught in my position, in my knowledge of sub 2 and creative financing. Don't bring it up, so to speak. Try to get a conversation going and then get somebody else involved. So I'm more worried about calling up, saying hello. I'm Joe Delli Carpini. I'm an agent out here in New York, but my partner and I are looking to purchase properties in San Joaquinto, California. And I kind of confirm some of the details that I can see on Zillow, because I brought it up on Zillow, that particular property. Well, at that point, how do you introduce in a manner that's not going to trigger a defense, whether they are willing to talk to their sellers about a creative or sub 2 type of purchase? Especially with this one, this is the second one down on the list, and it's a short sale, $106,000 in arrears. They're minus 15% in equity.
Yeah, bad example on that one, because short sales, you can't really do a whole lot about short sales. You're not going to take over a loan that's short sale, especially if it's approved by the lender. It's not like you can call the lender up and say, hey, can I sub 2 this from you?
Right.
So short sales, what I like to do is just, if it looks like a massive negative equity position, the first question is this a short sale? If it is, hey, good luck, bye.
Let it go. Okay.
Let it go.
Okay. Well, let's say you go back to the first one where, I know it's a bad example at 18.5% equity, but there may be something there in terms of, getting the seller to a hybrid type of deal, taking over their mortgage, giving them a down payment, or giving them a little cash in their pocket, doing a 12, 24-month type of, seller carry, whether 0% or whatever it is, because it's a high percentage in the FHA. Something there. So how to introduce the idea of something like that because they have a lot of equity in the house, and 3 days on the market, they're really not inclined to go that route right away, especially if their seller wants all the equity coming out right on the sale.
Think of that call as relationship building. Think of that call as, I want to build a relationship with this agent. Let me explain to you. What I like to do is take that deal off the table, right? So I would address it and say, look, this is how I purchase homes. It looks like this may not be a great candidate at this point in time because the sellers have more equity than we're typically used to. So I'll put that out there, right? And I'll say, let me explain to you how it could work on another listing of yours in the future. Mm-hmm. And what I would do is I would use an example or a hypothetical that mimics this scenario, meaning I would say something to the effect of, there are a lot of agents that we work with 30, 45, 60 days down the line who have had the property on the market and just haven't gotten the type of activity that they're hoping for. meaning they have to drop the price, they have to drop the price, they have to drop the price. And even though the listing started off as if it had a lot of equity in it, as a result of the price drops, now the seller only has $5,000, $10,000 max in net at closing. So let me explain to you how it could work in that scenario. The whole idea is that they're going to start to think about their own listing or listings that they're going to work on in the future. So what I would say is, let's use that hypothetical for a second. And let's say that the seller continues to drop the price. I'm looking at this as a potential opportunity for myself as a rental. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to stop the bleeding. I'm going to stop the price reductions. I'm okay paying full price at the current asking price. I'll pay all of the closing costs. I'll pay the current asking price. I can close on the seller's timeline, and I'm going to keep the mortgage in place. That's the value add for me personally. And so and I would go further into that, but just to kind of keep it short, I would leave it at that, and then basically come back to the listing that they currently have. Hey, I just want to stay in touch with you. I hope that this listing sells quickly and above asking price that you're currently at right now. However, if things change, or if you have something else down the road that needs this sort of a sale, something that's a little bit more unique, I want to be your resource. And I also want to show you how you can do it in a way that protects yourself and protects your seller. So really hands off. When I'm making these phone calls, what I do is if you can kind of see my hands, I kind of go, look, I'm just here as a resource. Like, I'm not trying to hard sell you on anything. My job is to provide you with education and value. And if we can work together, great. If we can't, then maybe we've at least formed a relationship and I've given you information that you can use in the future.
Okay. So can I just kind of come up with something right now and see if I'm on the right path?
Yeah. You want to role play one out, Joe?
It's full transparency and disclosure. So if I call this person, hey, Bo, this is Joe Delli Carpini from, I'm out in New York. I'm an agent out in New York looking to purchase some properties there in your area in Colorado. Hey, it might not work for your listing here, but the way I purchase properties is I try to go in and try to make a way for me to take over the property in a non-traditional sense. Maybe it's not going to work on this property as a cash offer, but maybe there's a way for us to get your seller the full amount of equity that he's looking for right now. See, I'm already lost. I'm thinking too far down the road.
That's okay. That's okay. So
too much
yeah,
down the road.
Stay in the moment a little bit longer, and so stick with that for a second. Meaning, if you're calling up an agent and you're explaining to them how you purchase homes, mm-hmm. What I would do is something like, between my partners and myself, we're buying, a few homes on a monthly basis. We're using them as either long-term rentals, co-living spaces, Airbnbs, whatever that is. And, as a result of our acquisition activity, it's very difficult for us to get favorable financing on rental properties currently. We're paying 7, 8, 9% sometimes, or at least those are the quotes that we're given. And so one way that we have found a way to help both sellers and also increase our portfolio is by paying full market value for properties, paying all of the closing costs for sellers, maximizing their equity as a result. And we're simply taking over the mortgages that are already in place. Have you ever done a transaction like that before?
It sounds so smooth and easy coming from your mouth.
Well, I've made a lot of these phone calls though, right?
Yeah.
And I've been beaten down and beaten down and beaten down. And I'm also doing this in a role play. This is not a live conversation, so it's going to sound a whole lot better, probably.
Right. But key points that I'm taking out of there is that we as a group, or myself, or me and my partner, buy multiple properties to hold as rentals per month. So it shows a little bit of being a player in the game, not a nuanced player. Hard for us to get favorable financing. looking for a way to help your seller maximize their equity and help us fill out our portfolio and we'll look at full value or market value for a purchase price. Right away, you're telling them, I'm not looking to chip it down. I'm trying to get you seller the most amount of equity, paying closing costs, and again, let them ask for commissions, and we'll talk about that later. You're buying multiple properties. I'd probably throw in there, I can probably, produce documentation to our power to be able to do that as well. And then that'd be something I'd talk to you about.
That's down the road.
Yeah. But it's
what it does, Joe, is it opens up a conversation.
Yes.
Really it kind of layers value, and then it opens up a conversation. Generally, agents, like I've said before, are not doing these types of transactions on a regular basis. So even if they've done one before, it's not something that they're super familiar with, right?
Yeah, I think the last part of that, like to your point, the last part of that, have you ever done a transaction like this before? It's different than the question, would you be able to ask your seller if they want to do something like this?
Yeah, you're taking the current listing off the table, right? You're just talking to the agent.
Right.
And basically, you're not even discussing the current listing. You're talking to the agent with the goal of how can we work together on something, whether it's this one or something else.
Okay.
A better way to ask that question at the end is, what's been your experience with that type of a transaction? Well, I have no experience. And then you can kind of go into, well, let me tell you a little story. That's a great spot for a third-party story. That you should all, by the way, have third-party stories, even if you haven't done a transaction, and use your quote-unquote partners in the community. Search through Facebook. You're going to hear all these stories of deals that have happened, right? So just because you haven't done a deal doesn't mean you don't have your own third-party stories, but it's always helpful to relate the current listing situation, whatever that is, whatever information you have available, to the third-party story that you're bringing up. So, for example, Paul, interestingly enough, coincidentally enough, when you chimed in, when you unmuted, I was talking about VA loans, and the listing that you called on is a VA loan, right? So the agent had what questions? This is for the group. What questions about VA loans did she have?
Can you assume it? Can you assume the loan?
Yep, that was the big one, right? She also mentioned, what about the seller's ability to purchase a home using a VA loan?
If he was able to use his entitlement on his next one.
Yep, exactly. So right off the bat, I can tell that agent is not familiar with how that process works, which is totally fine, by the way, right? Agents don't really know that area of finance. And so that allows you a little bit of an opening to say, well, let me tell you the story about this other veteran that was in a very similar situation where they were moving from their house in X and they were moving to their house in Y based on being restationed. A lot of agents that we work with are unfamiliar with the VA, either assumption process or entitlement process. Let me explain to you what we did there. Whether it works for your seller or not, I'm not sure, but this is how it did work for them. And when it comes to things like VA financing, FHA financing, anything that apply much more to a loan officer, someone who is much more experienced in loans than me, what I would do is always say, look, if we ever get to the point where this is even a question for you, let me connect you with our specific VA lender who does these kinds of things all the time for them to answer them directly, as opposed to hearing it from Joe Blow who can make anything up on the spot. I want you to hear from someone who's actually going to provide the financing for your client next. It always helps to have that team behind you, right? That team of either attorneys, loan officers, title companies. Build up that network so you have a team behind you that's supportive.
I had a sub 2 student that is a veteran explain to me, like, I'd never even heard of this before the No One Left Behind challenge, and Ingrid was addressing a VA loan. But yeah, I guess there's a certain amount they're entitled to a year, and they have to, somebody told me you could say, well, do you know if they've pulled their certificate? Do you know what they have like left on their entitlement?
Yep.
But I'm just now started hearing about it.
VA loans are very
8 years. I'm just learning about that now on this call.
Yeah, VA loans are very interesting. So every veteran has a certain amount of entitlement, obviously barring some certain situations, how they were, if they were dismissed in a way that doesn't allow them to have that entitlement, for example. But the VA loan limits vary by county, and I think it's like 96% of the counties are all the same. I don't know exactly what that number is. I want to say it's 750 something, but it continues to increase based on cost of living, things like that. And so a veteran can have as many VA loans as they want for zero down, as long as they have entitlement remaining. And they can even use their VA entitlement above their total entitlement amount and get favorable down payment adjustments based on the purchase price and the down payment requirement, that sort of thing. So it's a very complicated process. I don't pretend to be an expert in it, but I think that if you're calling on low equity, which largely are VA and FHA loans, there are certain things that you have to become familiar with so that you know how to answer those questions for potential sellers or the agents that they're working with.
A lot of them have, and I just started, I've only called a few agents, but a lot of them have the question about, even if it's not a VA loan, like, oh, how can they get another loan for their house? But that's where I've said about the third-party servicing company can like provide the documentation that, that their house is being paid for. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. I think that there's a stronger response to that, but that's a fine one.
What is it? I'm taking down everything you say. I wish you had a cheat sheet of all the things you say.
Well, thank you for that.
I'm serious. I would buy it.
We're going to start to provide all of these resources at sub2safely.com. In fact, I'll put this on the ticker here for everybody. We're going to start to put this at this website so you guys can access this. But it depends on the type of loan, Laura, that you're referring to. So if there is entitlement remaining on a VA loan, as long as the veteran from a DTI standpoint can qualify for another loan, then they can immediately go buy a new house using their VA entitlement.
Well, I mean, anybody, even not a VA, like when you approach. Okay.
And I'm just referencing the VA right now.
Gotcha.
The other situations, let's say it's just a conventional type of loan. Most of the time, especially at the price points that we're buying and selling these deals at, they're typically at the median price points or slightly less.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, those types of sellers don't have the income to qualify for their next home by keeping the mortgage that they had in place before. So the way that we do that is we'll do what's called a lease purchase, meaning we will put into place before closing a lease on the property. So technically the seller would lease the property to us. And the way that you do that is you have to have a formal lease agreement. You have to have, generally, these are lender requirements, it varies by lender, but what we've done in the past is we put first and last month's rent into an escrow account, or at least paid the seller first and last month's rental amount at current market rates. So you can't charge like $500 if it's a $4,000 rental area. And then what you do is you keep that in place for about a week or so. You close on the new property that the seller is buying because they can qualify using their DTI at that point. Largely, the seller is able to reclaim or apply some of that income from the rental, and that applies to their DTI. It's anywhere between 75% and 100% depending on the type of loan that they have. So what you do is let's call it a $2,000 a month rental payment. We take care of the lease agreement. We do first and last month's rent. They receive $4,000. That applies towards their monthly income which then applies towards their debt to income, so that now they're able to qualify for the next home.
So it looks like they're leasing their last house and
Correct.
have that income.
Correct.
I mean, I hear that and that sounds great, but just from all the homes I've purchased, like they look at time. Oh, you've been only leasing this 2 weeks. Like that's not been an income for a substantial amount of time. That's what comes to my mind. But
that's why it's super important to have really good loan officers in your corner, right? Or at least loan officers who are familiar with this process. Matthew Bell, CMG, is the guy to talk to about these sorts of things. He can do loans basically anywhere. And if you guys have any questions on how to structure something like this, he is there to help.
Repeat, Matthew Bell, CMG. What's CMG?
CMG Mortgage, CMG Financial. Let's see what it's technically called. CMG Home Loans, CMG Financial.
And this is to work qualifications for someone who is in a lease option with you as the lessee and the option to purchase.
That's one of the scenarios that he can help you out.
I'm sorry?
That's one of the scenarios that he can help you on. Absolutely.
Negate the DTI that they'd be charged or incur. Mm-hmm. So very similar to what a DSCR would do. They would use the income on the property to help you qualify for the loan that of your next purchase.
Very similar. Yep. Very, very similar. Guys, this was a ton of fun. I know all of us did not get on and make a phone call live. Will you guys please come back at a time in the future and we can do this again?
Oh, for sure. Go ahead. So as far as the list, there's 33. So we can call them after this, right?
Those are all yours.
Okay, so yours. I'm going to call 23 through 33. I mean, if we're dividing it by 3, Joe, you would have 1 through 11, and Paul, you would have 12 through 22.
Laura, call all of them.
Call them all.
Oh.
All of them.
Okay.
Call all of them. Work on your pace. Work on your whole spiel. These are your leads. There's no expectation from my standpoint at all to even work on these with you. If you need my help, I'm here.
Oh.
Except for the negative equity ones, like the high.
I would call just to have a conversation. Say, hey, is this a short sale? Yes. Okay, cool. Hey, by the way, this is what I do. You know, it's a good opportunity to connect.
But I mean, these are like Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I have somebody here who actually wants me to send them short sale conversations to have with, and it could be a referral fee of some sort that are going out of that. But so we don't have to, like, if we talk to any of these agents and we have good rapport and something growing, you don't want us to call you to work on the, I mean.
If you want help, Joe, I'm here. There's no expectation from my side at all. This is my little daily gift to you. So work these leads. Laura, I'm curious what the response is that's different than the 80+ day on market. Mm-hmm. Tell me, but I'm just happy to provide you guys with that data that's sponsored by RocketBotLeads.ai. And as always, guys, thank you so much. Paul, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
I'm on Facebook.
Cool. Love it.
So where all do you buy, Mike?
I buy primarily in Texas. So the 4 major markets in Texas I'll buy.
That's what I thought you said. So, but a lot of these are in Florida. So, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, they would be open. We'd be able to. So I am not comfortable with making offers to them, the numbers. So I just need to study a lot too, I feel like, because I can talk okay to agents, but I'm not comfortable giving an LOI.
Sure. If you need help, reach out to me directly. In fact, what we can do, Laura, if you really hit a point where you're like, I want to send out all these LOIs, let's schedule a time to get together. We can even record it together just so you and I have a record of it, and we can learn from it. So I'm here for you if you need me.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, real quick, can you send us all an email with the scorched earth as far as the sub 2?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
I'm actually going to be here next week as well. I think I signed up for next week as well, or the week after. So
love it.
I'm looking forward to making the calls on this lead sheet so that I can have a little bit more of a better understanding of how this is going to go for the next time I'm on.
Love it. Well, thank you guys for attending. Before we go, Laura, how can people reach out to you if they want to reach out to you?
I am in the Sub2 Facebook as well, but I mean, I'm fine giving my number too.
Go ahead.
314-629-9171.
Laura's your Midwestern gal if you guys want to work with Laura in the Kansas City area. Joe, what about you?
I am also in the Sub2 Facebook group, but you can call me directly at 914-469-2065 or shoot me an email at josephdc@, 1216realestate.com.
Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much for your participation. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Mike. Bye, everybody.
Bye.